Well, good morning. It's so good to see you guys today. I was expecting this morning to be really bright and sunny, but no, I woke up to gray clouds and sprinkles, which is okay. I mean, I'm not complaining. So let's go ahead and stand as we begin our time of worship together, guys. Christ would die for me. His goodness, His merit, His righteousness, the sinner's only plea. Oh, foolish pride, be crucified, the work is finished. All my boast is in Jesus, all my hope is His love. I will glory forever in what the cross has done.
Now fully forgiven, my life is filled with graces undeserved. For mercy that flowed down that sacred hill, let praises now return. Rise up, my soul, and bless the Lord. Who else is worthy? All my boast is in Jesus. All my hope is His love. And I will glory forever in what the cross has done. Oh, praise the one forever blessed, Him alone my heart adores, and I will boast in nothing less than the love of Christ my Lord. Oh, praise the one forever blessed, Him alone my heart adores, and I will boast in nothing less than the love of Christ my Lord. I boast not in riches, in strength or might, but in the grace of God. I glory in weakness to live as Christ, in plenty or in want, that I may know and all may see His power within me. All my boast is in Jesus, all my hope is His love, and I will glory forever in what the cross has done. Now I stand in His freedom, ransom clean in His sight. Oh, and I will not be ashamed, for my boast is Jesus Christ. My boast is Jesus Christ. Forever my boast is Jesus Christ. You give life, you are love, you bring light to the darkness, you give hope. You restore every heart that is broken. Great are you, Lord. You give life. You give life. You are love. You bring light to the darkness. You give hope. You restore every heart that is broken. Great are you, Lord. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise. We pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you only. Great are you, Lord. You give life. You are love. You bring light to the darkness. You give hope. Restore every heart that is broken. Great are you, Lord. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise. We pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you only. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise. We pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you only. Sing out all the earth. All the earth will shout your praise. Our hearts will cry. These bones will sing. Great are you, Lord. All the earth will shout your praise. Our hearts will cry, these bones will sing. Great are you, Lord. All the earth will shout your praise. Our hearts will cry, these bones will sing. Great are you, Lord. lifted high. It's your breath. It's your breath in our lungs. So we pour out our praise. We pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs. So we pour out our praise to you only.
Would you remain standing with me? Would you remain standing with me and let's pray. God, we've acknowledged that you are great, and we want to just linger there for a moment. You are great beyond our comprehension, in the sense that you are a God who both transcends above and in the midst of the universe, and yet you have invited us to speak personally to you. You are an immanent God. God, you are great in the sense that we are limited by this time, space, frailty sort of continuum that we live in, but you transcend it all. God, you are great in that as the creator of the universe, you never once decided to just throw it away and start over. You are a redeeming God, taking what you made and redeeming it and restoring it. God, you are great beyond our comprehension, and so we celebrate that this morning. We pray this in Christ's name. Amen. Okay, now you may be seated. Good morning, River Church. It's good to be with you guys. My name's Pastor Billy. If you are a first-time guest, we just want to say welcome. Thank you for joining us. You should have received a connection card on your way in. Fill it out, take it to the connection table after the service. Randy, his wife Lydia, I will be there. We'll just get a chance to know you, say hello to you. Everyone else, you guys know this is one of the primary ways, not the only way, but one of the primary ways you can connect with us. So if you have any prayer requests, any update of information you'd like for us to be praying about, or something you'd like for us to contact you about, whatever it is, put it on your connection card, put it in the offering basket towards the end of the service, and we'll get those we'll be praying for you and all of those sorts of things. So, again, these are super important. Mr. Modesto tells us all the time these things are not cheap. They're expensive. They're good resources, though, guys. So if you can, if you need to, I would just take advantage of these documents. They're super helpful. Our only other announcement is we're having trouble with this slide, but it's for camp, okay? We got Camp Zephyr is in the summer, July 1st through the 5th. And the reason why we've been talking about it 2 weeks in a row is this Wednesday, we have to, as a church, we have to start to solidify, start to narrow in how many spots we will need. So if you know a high school student or a middle school student who's interested in going to camp, please let me know. Please let Molly know. Okay, high school, middle school, we'll talk about payments and all that other stuff later, but at this point, we just need to know how many kids, how many students are going to be going. Okay, so again, if you know a high school student or a middle school student and you want them to go to camp, you think it'd be good for them, I would just highly encourage you to talk to me or Molly after the service, just so we can, on our end, start to narrow in how many spots we need. One other thing, if you would also, we've had this done in the past, if you would like to, maybe you don't know any high school or middle school students, but you would like to sponsor a student, that would be great also. Bless you. That'll be great also. And so if you're interested in sponsoring, you can, whatever donation you'd like to make to our kiddos, that would be super helpful. We've already had some donations for our high school camp or middle school camp for Camp Zephyr. And again, if you're interested in just helping out financially with some of the burden on that for the families and whatnot, please let me know. Please let Molly know so we can start to get all that stuff organized. I know summer is kind of a ways away. July 1st through the 5th seems like it's not very close at all, but it's going to be here super quick. So we just need to be organized on our end. So please, any way you can help, that would be super helpful. That's all I have to say. If you guys could just stand up and say hello to one another.
tired and bring your shame. Bring your guilt and bring your pain. Don't you know that's not your name? You will always be much more to me. And every day I wrestle with the voices that keep telling me I'm not right. But that's alright, 'cause I hear a voice and he calls me every day. When others say I'll never be enough. And greater is the one living inside of me than he who is living in the world. In the world.
Hi, River Church. When you're gone for a few weeks, I was gone for 9 days. You come back and when you're gone from anywhere, you come back and you notice things that you don't normally notice, you know. And so, like, sometimes it kind of distracts you until you kind of put your blinders back on. And so, the two random thoughts I had. One is that Zephyr slide. It hurt the eyes. It's no wonder that the PowerPoint thing shut down. That was like painful. And the other thing is, somebody over here sneezes just like my grandfather used to sneeze. I don't know who that was. But just like my grandfather. Yeah, so this is sort of a misplaced announcement. It's not really an announcement. It's more like a high five. But if we have that slide that we've put up a few times regarding generalists becoming specialists, I just want to say that I'm really proud, as though I had anything to do with it, but I'm really proud of how several of you have stepped up just in the last few weeks, and I'm going to leave people out, of course, but as I see Hector and Andrew running PowerPoint, running the slide, I don't have to worry about who's over there on the computer. Just every week they're there. And as I see Joseph and Olivia taking care of our big days, taking care of our whole Easter weekend, and just saw how that went so smoothly. Even though I was a long distance away, I kept track, and I just knew that things were in good hands. And Elise and Victor just doing a wonderful job of leading worship so many days in a row, and Pastor Billy leading you guys well, and there are people, of course, that serve weekly, regularly, and serve well, and some of you have been doing it for like 12 years, so congratulations, job well done. Let's keep that up. This specific idea of us collectively, more importantly, individually, seeing ourselves as specialists more and more. The person that I was going to lead with in giving this little speech, and then I left out, was, I don't know that anybody's been working harder than Jeff Ray. And if we, all this, the sounds and lights and everything else. We've got little, not to alarm you, but we've got a couple of little, right there, little microphones. And at first I was like, wait a minute, those are cameras. Somebody's filming us. But they're not cameras. They're little mics, because we're trying to do, we are doing a better and a better and a better job of capturing what we do here for the purpose of it being online. And dare I use the scary phrase, Jeff may not even like it for me to say this, but dare I use the scary phrase, live stream. That takes money. And so if you, like, perhaps you normally give or you normally don't give, but you got something extra, you're like, man, live stream, that scratches an itch for me, then just know that's an area of, an exciting area of growth that we're looking at, and it takes money. More than that, it takes the expertise of Jeff Ray and others. But anyway, good job, Jeff Ray. Good job. And good job, everybody. All right. We can put that away now. I'm going to pray twice. The last prayer was just a spontaneous prayer. This is a prayer I actually was supposed to pray. So let's pray. Lord God, for generations your people have said this of you. The Israelites used to say this. They used to say, no one has ever heard of a God like you who works on behalf of his children. So we rest in that this morning, that you are for us. We get confused by that sometimes, but you are for us. Scriptures say that you are love. It doesn't just say that you love, but you are love. So we just want to rest in your goodness this morning. We want to rest in your eminence this morning. We want to rest in your deep concern and commitment to us, for us this morning. We rest in that. May we just let go of, and I pray this for myself personally, may we let go of the stuff that we brought with us this morning, the distractions, the noise, the stress, the anxiety, all stuff that you care about, but may we just let go of that and rest in you and hear from you. Lord, we pray this in Christ's name. Amen. Amen. Well, I'm excited that we're starting a new series. Some of you old-timers, I preached through the Gospel of John over 10 years ago in the early days, and we're going to do it again. And so this is week 1. It's a new series. It's going to take us through the summer. Actually, it's going to take us through the end of the year. We're going to take verse by verse, and I'm praying that this will be the most insightful and helpful series to date here at River Church. Next week we start a verse by verse study. We'll start with that great prologue in the Gospel of John, famous words where it speaks of the Word becoming flesh and dwelling among us. So we'll do that next week. We'll start our verse by verse. But here's what we're going to do today. I want to introduce you to John, the Apostle John, the author. I want to introduce you to him as a man. All out of Scripture. He's mentioned, of course, in all of the Gospels. He is one of the 12 apostles. But I want to introduce you to the man, and here's why. Because when I read a book, like I'm reading, this makes me sound like a reader. I don't know that I would necessarily call myself a reader, but I'm reading 3 books right now, nonfiction books. And you know what I do in the evenings? I go with 2 of them. I go and I listen to the author's podcasts because I want to know about the author. I geek out a little bit about like what the author, what that person cares about, what their worldview is, what they're doing. If I can find out what the author is doing in their life, like in real time, it helps me understand this book that I'm reading by the author. So obviously, John the Apostle recorded 0 podcasts, but we have lots of rich information on the Apostle John. And so if we're going to study him or his writing over the next however many months, I think it's good that we get to know him. So I've been, as I always do when I start a sermon series, I've been reading on the history of his time and reading commentaries and looking at backgrounds and brushing up on the details. So the life, the man, he's no lightweight. He is the second most prolific author in the New Testament, right after the Apostle Paul. John wrote 5 books of the New Testament. We'll talk more about that later. So that's where we're going today. I ask you to use your imagination. What I mean by that is not make things up in your own brain about John, but just think creatively and imaginatively today on the real flesh and blood John. Lean in, and mostly what we're going to look at today is the close, the intimate relationship that John had with Jesus. It's a relationship sort of like a slightly, John looks at Jesus as sort of a slightly older teacher, mentor, rabbi, which just means teacher. In that day, in the days of Jesus and his apostles. In that day, the teacher-student relationship was much different than it is today. Today, we identify with schools, and some of you have rings to prove that, your identity with your school, universities, degree plans. Lydia and I are about to send our fourth kid off to college. Nolan's going off to college this fall, and so we're looking at all that, payment plans and degree plans and work study and all that kind of stuff, and housing and buildings and all of that. Well, not so much, or in fact, not at all in Jesus' day. In that day, you would choose a teacher and you would give up your former life, and you would really move in with the teacher, and you would follow the teacher around, and you would learn all the time you're following that teacher around, and you would actually attend to some of their needs, I suppose, to kind of as part payment for the education that you're receiving. And that is the relationship that John the Apostle had with Jesus. Not really schools in those days, just teachers. And that can be somewhat disputed when you look at rabbinical, other formal religious stuff. But basically, that is how the rabbi-student relationship was looked at. So, lifelong, deep friendship that John had with Jesus. I want us to understand that deeply today. I think it will aid our study over the next several months. So let's begin with John as a young man. He is associated with his brother. You probably, if you may not know the Bible, but if you know the Bible, you probably, James and John probably rolls off of your tongue pretty easily because they were truly brothers. James and John, their father was Zebedee, or at least we know them from Scripture as the sons of Zebedee, James and John. And so John, the son of Zebedee, would have been an accurate description of who he is. He's a young business owner. Scholars would estimate that he's probably in his 20s, and here's where we get that from. He is the younger brother of James. We know that Jesus was around 30 at this time, and there's reason to believe that all of the apostles were approximately the same age, and Peter may have been a little older, and John may have been a little bit younger, or he was a little bit younger because he is the younger brother of James. And so we think him to be in his 20s at the start of his ministry, and we surmise, and he was a fisherman. In fact, you've heard me say this a lot over the last 12 years, but I'm going to say it again because I love this detail. At least 7 of the 12 apostles were commercial fishermen. They did that for a living. I love that. They're strong backs. They're early risers. They work hard at their vocation. So let's look at several stories of John interacting with Jesus. So let's start with this. Jesus calling the first disciples to follow him. Luke 5:2 says this. By the way, we're gonna look at several passages in different Gospels today, and I'm going to be summarizing a lot of passages. So I'll just be telling you the story, and you can look it up later if you want. This one we're going to look at word for word. Jesus saw 2 boats by the lake, but the fishermen had got out of them and were washing their nets. We'll go on with that in a little bit, but just think on that. They'd been fishing all night. Jesus sees 2 boats by the lake. The fishermen had left the fishing job, and now they're doing the job that I hate, and that's cleaning up the equipment. Man, I hate that. I've always hated cleaning my boat. Part of the reason I hate cleaning my boat after I fish is I'm really, really paranoid about rust, corrosion. I want to take care of my stuff, and so I'm meticulous about cleaning, and yet I hate it at the same time. I really thought when Lydia and I had our 5th kid, like this little boy, he's going to be the boat cleaner. It didn't really work out that way, so I still clean the boat. They know how to do it. They'll do it when I ask them. But
I hate it, and yet I do it. You may know it, like maybe you hate washing your car, but you won't let anyone else touch it. It's just that important. All right, so two boats. The Zebedee brothers are probably, and I'll show you why I say this, probably partners in business with Peter's family. So John and Peter, business partners. It says that in Luke chapter 5, verse 10. You may be surprised that it says that, but it does. This is their business partners. All right, let me tell you the next story. Before we put, okay, it's up there. Just leave that up there. Here's the story leading to that passage. You probably recall this story. Jesus sees the fishermen. They've been fishing all night. They haven't caught anything. They're back. It's the same passage. And he goes to them and he suggests, or he tells them that they should go fish. And they're like, well, we fished all night. We didn't catch anything. You know, I can't imagine a stranger coming up and saying, why don't you try it again? You know, I fished yesterday and we caught fish, but it was a hard, brutal wind, clouds. It was tough. Whenever I came in, I was done. If somebody would have said, why don't you go out again, like a stranger, I would not have heeded their suggestion. But Peter says, okay, I'll do it. And they go out, and it says that they catch so many fish that it's going to capsize the boat. He calls another boat up. They're dragging the fish onto the boat. And this is, Peter says to Jesus, he says, listen, he says, you need to get away from me. Like, I'm a normal guy, and you're freaking me out, right? What's going on there is, you remember this terminology we used months ago in a different sermon series? When God's space invades our space, it's intimidating in the best sense of the word. And that's why Peter's like, I don't know what to do with you, Jesus, because he sees the divine interjected into the ordinary. Oh, that we might experience that more often. And in the verse it says this, they signaled to their partners in the other boat to come and help them, and they came and filled both boats so that they began to sink. Yeah. Skipping a few verses, verse 11, it says this. And when they had brought their boats to land, they left everything and followed him. Yeah, when the divine invades the ordinary of my space, my perspective on my stuff, it changes. It's a really curt, stark, and yet emotionally riddled statement. And when they had brought their boats to land, they left everything. And when we read that John left everything, we understand that to perhaps mean a lot of wealth. It's a very common day, and yet this is a very unique opportunity. He's just fishing with his dad. John's fishing with his dad, fishing with his business partners. And one moment changes everything. And for the next 3 years, Jesus seems to take John on as his student and love John uniquely, like one might love a brother, like one might love a kid brother, actually. Mark 1, verse 20, let's look at this verse. It says, immediately, Jesus called James and John, the two brothers, and they left their father Zebedee in the boat with the hired servants and followed him. So what is John walking away from along with his brother James? He's steady income, probably some sizable amount of wealth, the family business, maybe the hope of a wife and kids and the normal life that he had planned for. I mean, this move on John's part is a game changer, to say the least. So John leaves everything and follows Jesus, And I see him in the stories that we read today as a young buck who looks up to Jesus the way a younger brother looks up to an older brother. What is one sign that someone sees you as a kid brother? Well, one sign is that they give you a nickname, literally or symbolically. We see that in our house with our, especially with the younger half of our children, and especially with our youngest. You know, nicknames are given. And when you see somebody as a younger or as a kid brother, you know, they might call you Boo or Bubba or Tiny Dancer or Sassafras or whatever, you know. It's pretty good, huh? So Jesus gives John a nickname. In Mark chapter 3, we're not going to project this, but in Mark chapter 3, Jesus, it says, appointed James, the son of Zebedee, and John, the brother of James, to whom he gave the name Boanerges, that is, sons of thunder. So that's the nickname he gives to James and to John, the two brothers, sons of thunder. I don't know the meaning behind that nickname, but I'm quite certain that the other apostles must have said, like, yep, Jesus, you nailed that one. Sons of thunder. I don't even know. You know, it sounds NASCAR or professional wrestling or something. But he gives them a nickname because he sees them in this affectionate way as a younger brother. We get several pictures of John as young and pretentious, as presumptuous and undisciplined and restless. He was probably a real source of frustration for the other apostles. John, in the stories that we read, some we don't have time to read today, that he's zealous, he wants to lead, and this gets him into trouble at times. He says and does things that warrant Jesus' correction and warrant Jesus' rebuke at times, and that's how little brothers are. They kind of pick at you, and they kind of expect extra attention, and they're often shooting off their mouths. Sometimes, however, we've learned this in our own home. Sometimes the little brother is worth listening to. Other times, not so much. But sometimes he's worth listening to. So, Jesus corrects and at times finds it necessary to rebuke John. But I see it like when a coach sees some extra potential in a young player, and the coach actually doesn't just see extra potential, but actually loves that special player in a unique way. My dad used to coach me in basketball, and it wasn't that he saw extra potential, but he loved me dearly, but it played out in a weird way. He would correct me more, severe isn't the right word, but he would correct me more often than he did the other players. And I was like, what's up with that? And sometimes he would rebuke me in a good way. My dad was a great guy, and I got nothing. Me and my dad are good. But he would correct me and sometimes even rebuke me more sternly than the other players. And I came to realize he loves me. He is investing in me in a different way. He's got the long game. He's got the long game in mind. Even as my basketball coach, you know. And Jesus, the way in which he invests in John is unique. I'll give you a couple of examples, and we don't have time to turn there, but I'll just tell you, Luke chapter 9, Jesus corrects John. Here's what happens. John, he's complaining about this person who's casting out demons, but he's not a part of their group. He's not a part of their club. He's not, they haven't signed off on him. And so John says, Master, we saw someone casting out demons in your name, and we tried to stop him because he does not follow with us. But Jesus said to him, do not stop him, for the one who is not against you is for you. Another example, a more stern correction. John and his brother James, there's this unresponsive village. They're not responding to Jesus, his message, his presence. And in Luke 9, it says, when Jesus' disciples, James and John, saw it, they said to Jesus, Lord, do you want us to tell fire to come down from heaven and consume the village? And it says, but Jesus turned and rebuked them. Yet John brought out the correction and even the rebuke of Jesus at times. There's another time when they asked Jesus, when John especially asked Jesus, hey, can me and my brother, can we sit on your right side and your left side in heaven for eternity? How pretentious, right? And Jesus, he says, are you able to drink from the cup that I'm going to drink from? Meaning, do you think that you could suffer what I'm about to suffer? And he's like, you betcha. He's just a little bit overconfident, like a little brother is. And Jesus rebukes him, but Jesus loves him. Yeah. John, though he's maybe the youngest of the 12 apostles, he is esteemed to the position of the inner circle of Jesus. Did you know that Jesus had a most close inner circle? He had his 12 apostles, and that is a dear inner circle. But then he had, and if you'll see it all the time, Peter, James, and John. Peter, James, and John. Those whom Jesus spent extra time with. It's sort of a model. Some spiritual teachers give this as a model. If you want to be a person of influence, have 10 or 12 people in your circle of influence, and then have an even tighter knit group of like 3 people. That's what Jesus did, pouring his life into Peter, James, and John. Do you remember the story of the Mount of Transfiguration? Does that mean anything to you? Jesus goes up on a mountain with Peter, James, and John, and then his glory is like revealed in a deeper way. It had been veiled or covered, but his glory is revealed in a very unique way, and they don't know what to do with it. They're overwhelmed, Peter, James, and John. You see, John is privileged. He gets to pal around with Jesus. He gets to learn from Jesus, his Lord, his Savior, his big bro, his rabbi. And then we fast forward to the Last Supper. John, the apostle, of course, all 12, he's at the Last Supper. And he gets to see Jesus transform that ancient tradition, the Passover meal, and give it new meaning. This is a photo of Leonardo da Vinci's Last Supper. It's one of the more famous paintings that has ever been painted. And by the way, have you ever heard that story? Jesus goes into a restaurant and he says, I'd like a table for 26. I'd like a table for 26, please. And the attendant's like, but I only count 13 in your group. He says, yeah, but we're all going to sit on the same side of the table. So Leonardo da Vinci, I've been studying this, just reading about this painting last night. It was in the 1500s that it was created, painted. It's like 4 years that it took him, well, because he would leave for long periods of time, and then he would come back and paint. It's in Milan, Italy, in a little, I'll call it a chapel. It started falling apart like less than 10 years after Da Vinci painted it, because he used some materials that were unproven, and he tried a new technique. And so while his other paintings, the Mona Lisa maybe being the most famous, they're preserved and they're well done, but this thing has been falling apart. It's gone through World War II, and it's been repainted so many times that it may not even really be accurate to call it the original, but it's still there, and it depicts for us this beautiful act where Jesus transforms this ancient tradition, the Passover meal, into something new and fresh for us that we will experience here in just a few moments. But did you know this? While this painting, it depicts the beauty of the meal and the friendship is captured, you can't see it very well, but they've all sort of been, from I don't know how credible it is, but I think it's pretty credible. They've all sort of been identified, and there's something right here you can't even see, but that's supposed to be Judas, and he knocks over a little bowl of salt, and the salt goes spilling because he's startled. It's been lost to time, but there's some accurate reproductions of it that just happened like 10 years after Leonardo da Vinci painted it, and those accurate reproductions give us a picture of what it was like. Anyway, beautiful meal, beautiful friendship is captured. But did you know this? That John, the apostle, was responsible for setting up all the details of that Last Supper. Yeah, Jesus sends him. The Gospels tell us that Jesus sends John along with Peter to prep for the last meal. Only those two. Run ahead and prepare, set the table. Why do you think he chose John to do that? I think the most simple answer would be, John is faithful. John is loyal. You could count on John. Maybe he's a little mouthy, but you could count on him. He's the, as Truett, my oldest son, and I refer to people, he's the I'll drive out and find you sort of friend. You know, you get stuck out on Boca Chica Beach, like, I'll come help you get unstuck. He's that kind of man. And this is the kind of man that you want on your side. And when Jesus needed important things done, he knew that he could count on John. We'll get to more of that later. Let me say that again. When Jesus needed important things done, like the care of his mother, we'll get to that later, you call on this kind of a guy. Continuing on, Jesus' betrayer in John chapter 13, you can look it up later. Jesus' betrayer is pointed out. You remember that stark story where Jesus tells the apostles, one of you is about to betray me. In fact, some people believe that this was painted. It shows the shock and dismay of every apostle when Jesus drops that bit of news. Like, what? One of us is the betrayer, right? But here's what you may have forgotten. In John chapter 13, when he says that, Peter says to John, hey, you go ask him what he's talking about. Like, everybody wanted to know, what does he mean by that? But in John 13, we're told that they all say, John, you go ask him. Ask Jesus, what's he talking about? That one of us... Why was John tapped as the one to ask him that specific question? It seems that maybe John had an inside track with Jesus. And at the Last Supper, John is sitting right next to Jesus. This doesn't exactly portray that, but in the Gospels, it says that he's, in fact, the most accurate, but it's weird, the most accurate translation, but it's weird, so we don't say it this way. It says that at the Last Supper, John, literally it says, was in Jesus' bosom. What that probably means practically is that they were leaning on each other like shoulder to shoulder. How many people get to, lean back on the back of Jesus as a beloved friend? You see, John was a true follower of Jesus with no agenda. Just love for his teacher, love for his Savior. Judas' kiss gave the appearance of love, but it was driven by an agenda. It was driven by the fact that Judas initially thought Jesus was going to be useful. How often maybe do we struggle with the sense that we follow Jesus because he is perhaps useful? But John had no agenda. Judas wanted Jesus to hurry up and conquer Rome and usher in this kingdom in a military sense, give us back our nation with might and power. And now Judas, sees, nope, Jesus isn't going to do that. He's not going to adhere to my agenda. He's weak. he's a failure, or perhaps Judas thought, I can force Jesus' hand. But John had no agenda, just love, just love. Perhaps the saddest story from John's perspective, perhaps the saddest story from John's perspective, would be the Garden of Gethsemane. It's recorded in Mark 14. Do you remember the story? Jesus takes, again, his closest friends, his inner circle. He takes Peter, James, and John into the garden. Again, this is John's low point. The moment he regrets, perhaps for the rest of his life. Jesus takes them into the garden. He asks them to pray with him, to pray for him. Jesus is sweating, the Gospels say, sweating drops of blood. He's saying things like, oh, if it's at all possible, Father, let this cup, meaning his horrific crucifixion, which was beautiful in a sense, right? But this horrific crucifixion that he's about to, he knows he's about to experience that. He's sweating drops of blood. He's saying, if any way, let this cup, this experience pass from me, God, but not your will, but my, all of that. He's crying out to his Father. And if you remember the story, John, at that moment in time, it's late. I don't judge him, but he can't even muster up the strength to stay awake and pray with Jesus. He keeps falling asleep. Again, I don't judge him. He's only weak, a weak human like me. He's just a man. He's short-sighted at that moment. He has regrets. Yeah, I mean, it's part of being a human being, is we fail one another. It's part of being Christ followers. We fail Jesus all the time. John fails Jesus, but Jesus does not fail John. Yeah, going on, Jesus' arrest, his mock trial, sort of a kangaroo court. No witnesses, made up charges. And if you recall, only 2 apostles are left at that moment in time. Peter and John. They're following along quietly, trying not to get into too much trouble themselves, but they don't leave Jesus' side until, the sad story where Peter denies Jesus 3 times, and then the rooster crows, and he goes away and figures he's trash now, so he goes back to fishing, Peter does. And so now we're left with one person, that's John. At the crucifixion in John chapter 19, it says, when Jesus saw his mother and the disciple whom he loved standing nearby, that's the Apostle John, he said to his mother, woman, behold your son. And then he said to the disciple, behold your mother. And from that hour, the disciple took her to his own home. Here's where I'm going. There is no evidence that day of any other apostle being at the foot of the cross, save John the apostle. The Bible is silent here. So we're led to believe that perhaps every other apostle had abandoned Jesus at this point. Out of fear, they had slinked off into the shadows. Every one of them except for John. And John is now, he's a grown man with a pastor's heart for Jesus' mom. Standing with Jesus' mom, Mary, comforting her. I mean, imagine, she's watching her son tortured and executed. John is holding her up. She is no doubt in an emotional wreck. And he, John, the son of thunder, holds her limp body up. I think on this, what kind of relationship must Jesus and John have had for this to transpire? And then this most unusual scene, if you recall, I think you all read it last week. The empty tomb. The ladies come to the tomb. They find the door rolled away. Mary Magdalene runs to tell Peter and John. And then in John chapter 20, this odd scene where it says that there's this sprint to the tomb. John, I'm going to call him the younger apostle, and Peter, I'm going to call him the older apostle. They sprint to the tomb, and it's made very clear that John outruns Peter and gets there first. And Peter, no doubt, thinks to himself, with John, everything is a competition, right? He gets there first. He waits it out. Fast forward sometime, John and his brother James and Peter, at this point, I don't know exactly how to explain this, but they'd all gone back to fishing. And Jesus appears to them, appears to the disciples on the seashore. They're out on the boat fishing. And in John 21, it says that John is the first to recognize Jesus standing on the shore. He's the first. Like, that's Jesus. I know that's Jesus. Maybe his eyes are better. Maybe he just knew Jesus' mannerisms that well. Like when I watch my sons out on the football field, there's 22 fellas dressed in the same kind of uniform, 11 in dark uniforms and 11 in light uniforms, but they're all dressed alike, and yet I can pick out my son, just even if I don't see their numbers, just because the way he stands, his mannerisms, how he carries himself. In the same way, I think maybe John just knew Jesus that well. He could pick him out even at a distance. Continuing on, we move into the book of Acts, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, and the book of Acts. And the book of Acts begins with the story of Jesus ascending into heaven. He, John, he's no longer a student. Jesus has ascended into heaven, and John is ready. And remember, the angels, they say to John and the other apostles, why are you standing here? Get to work. Plant the church. And so he does. He does. John gets to work, and he writes a good chunk of the New Testament, as I've already said. He writes the Gospel of John. He writes 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John, the letters. And then he writes the book of Revelation. It's also formerly known as the Revelation of John. It's written by the same guy. The Gospel of John, the 3 letters of John, and the Revelation of John, the last book in the Bible. As I said, he's the only person that writes more of the New Testament would be the Apostle Paul. One by one, John, an older man now, sees his classmates die. John lives to a very old age. He sees his classmates die. He witnesses Paul come to faith. He witnesses the birth of the church. Recorded secular history tells us that perhaps the authorities tried to boil John as a martyr for his faith. Somehow it didn't work, or he didn't die. So then they exile him to the island of Patmos. And he's there, and he's no doubt alone and lonely. And out of that comes the book of Revelation, the revelation of the Apostle John. And in the first chapter, John says that Jesus comes to him in a spirit dream-like experience. We don't know exactly, because Jesus has already ascended to heaven, but he comes and he visits him in this supernatural way. And John must have been lonely on that island. And Jesus, think on this, comes to John in his hour of need. And he ministers to John. I mean, yeah, what we know about the book of Revelation is that he tells John about the end of the age and the judgment for sin and the destruction of God's enemies and a new heaven, a new earth. He reveals to him what King Jesus, what he looks like in his full array of glory. It must have reminded him of when he saw Jesus on the Mount of Transfiguration. Like, I've seen stuff like this before. He shows him how people from every nation make up the worshiping church for eternity. Yes, he reveals all of that to John. But before Jesus gets to all the details of the end times, John says quite simply, Jesus laid his hand on me and he said, do not be afraid. Then John gets to see all, experience all, and he's writing it all down like this dreamlike sequence. But it all began with the comfort of Jesus and a steady hand on a trembling shoulder. According to written history from the 2nd century A.D., John lived to an extremely old age, and he had to be carried from Christian meeting to Christian meeting. At this point, he's, according to recorded history, he's back in Ephesus. So imagine him being carried to a gospel community on Tuesday and a gospel community on a Wednesday. And again, this recorded history tells us that he was so old that time, he could barely speak. He would simply repeat over and over, little children, love one another. Little children, love one another. A message repeated in several of his other writings that made it into the Bible, right? His letters. Little children, love one another. In Galatians, which was written by the Apostle Paul, in Galatians chapter 2, the Apostle Paul calls John, quote, a pillar of the Jerusalem church. Yeah, John was a church planter, a friend of Jesus, the caretaker of Jesus' mother, a writer of much of the New Testament. Oh, to be like John. Oh, to live a life like John. How can we do that? As we start this journey that we're going to go on over the next several months, how can we do that? Well, the key was John's understanding that Jesus loves him. And if there's a message that every one of us in this room needs to hear this morning, it's that you can rest in the fact that Jesus loves you. You know, we used to sing this song, this simple song, Jesus loves me, this I know, for the Bible tells me so. And yet, many of us in this room, we feel like trash. We feel unlovable. We feel like somehow we have outrun the mercy of Jesus. I want to express the good news, the gospel, into your life this morning and say that Jesus truly loves you. It's astounding. It's hard to believe. Yeah, John. The key to his life was his understanding that Jesus loved him. You see, John gave himself a nickname, right? You may know that. John gave himself a nickname. In the Gospel of John, he gave himself a nickname. No longer would he be called the Son of Thunder, right? My brother can have that title. James can be called the Son of Thunder. He gave himself a new nickname. Do you remember what it was? He repeatedly referred to himself as, quote, the one whom Jesus loved. Now, a cursory reading might say, well, that's quite pretentious that he would give himself that title, but I think not. I think he was just a man who really rested in the love of Jesus. And this is how we need to see our own identity. The one whom Jesus loves. That's you. Now see, we fall into the same trap that the religious people of his day did. And we say, like, Jesus, he's a friend of sinners. And Jesus would be like, yeah, I am. I love them. I love those sinners. I'm like, oh, but we need to qualify that, or we need to classify that. Let's just rest in that for today. Jesus loves you. You are the one whom Jesus loves. Romans 5:8 says, but God shows his love for us in this. While we were still sinners, Christ died for us. Do we fail Jesus? Yes. Do we fall asleep on Jesus? All the time. But he does not fail you. He does not fall asleep on you. Yeah, let's go on this journey together over the next several months. Let's study the life and times of Jesus through this lens of John the Apostle, the one whom Jesus loved. Amen. Would you bow your heads with me and let's pray? Right where you're seated, would you just contemplate for a moment? This is what I'm doing as well. Contemplate for a moment. What does that mean? That Jesus loves me. It's a bit hard to fathom, isn't it? But just think on that for a moment. What does that mean? And then let me pray over you. Let me pray over us and say, God, would you give us a, I don't know, I'll use the word tangible, more of a tangible understanding. What does that mean? God, I pray for my friends here. I pray for myself that we would just feel, experience, know your love poured out in Jesus more richly today. As we come to the table of communion and we recall that Jesus